My name is Caleb. I'm 36, and I work as a licensed CPA for a mid-size accounting firm in Columbus, Ohio. I have spent the last 14 years learning exactly how money moves, through accounts, through families, through paperwork that most people sign without reading. I know what fraud looks like. I know what it smells like. I know the specific silence it makes when it's sitting right across from you at Thanksgiving dinner. I want to tell you what happened when my brother used my name, my credit, and my social security number to buy a $340,000 house, and how I found out not from a bank, not from a detective, but from a paralegal who dialed the wrong number on a Tuesday afternoon in March. She thought she was calling him. She had our last name. She had the area code. She was confirming a closing date. She said, "Is this regarding the Whitmore property on Delancey Street?" I said I didn't know what she was talking about. There was a pause. The kind that happens when someone realizes they've handed a grenade to the wrong person. She said, "I'm so sorry. I may have the wrong," and then she caught herself. "Can I ask who I'm speaking with?" I told her my name. There was a longer pause. "Sir," she said carefully, "your name is on the mortgage application." I was sitting in my office on the 4th floor of a building I'd worked in for 11 years. I had a cup of coffee going cold on my desk. I had a quarterly report open on my screen. I had, up until that moment, considered myself a person with a fairly complete picture of his own life. I asked her to repeat what she'd said. She did. I asked her to hold for one moment. I pulled up my credit report on a second monitor, the one I use for client files, and I sat there in a suit I'd ironed myself that morning, looking at a mortgage inquiry I had never made, for a property I had never seen, in a neighborhood I had never visited, attached to my name, my number, and my signature. Let me tell you about my brother Marcus. Marcus is 33. 3 years younger than me, 5 inches taller, and the kind of person who fills a room so completely that you forget to notice what he's carrying out of it. Growing up, Marcus was the one people remembered. Loud laugh, easy smile, the sort of charisma that made teachers forgive late homework and coaches forgive missed practices. I was the quiet one. The one who read the instructions. The one who showed his work. We were close in the way that siblings are close when one of them keeps saving the other one from consequences. I didn't see it that way for a long time. I thought I was just being a good brother. When Marcus was 22, he needed a cosigner for a car loan. I signed. When he was 25, he needed someone to put a utility account in their name because his credit had taken a hit. I did it. When he was 28 and starting a landscaping business, he needed a business credit card with a higher limit than his own history would support. I called in a favor at my own bank and backed it personally. Each time, Marcus thanked me. Each time, he made good. Mostly. The car loan had 2 late payments I covered without telling him. The utility bill ran $200 past what he'd promised and I absorbed it without mentioning it. The business card had a balance that sat for longer than agreed, and I paid it down quietly one November so it wouldn't affect my own profile heading into tax season. I told myself this was normal. That families carry each other. That Marcus was finding his footing and I had a steady enough floor to let him borrow some of mine. I never stopped to ask myself whether he was borrowing or whether he had simply decided the floor was his. Our parents live in Dayton. Dad retired from the Postal Service. Mom taught elementary school for 31 years and has the voice to prove it. They are not complicated people. They are people who raised 2 sons, worked hard, went to church, and believed deeply that family is the unit that protects you when the world outside doesn't. They were right about that. The problem was the protection only ever moved in one direction. I don't blame my parents for what Marcus did. I want to be clear about that. But I have had to accept something in the years since, that the way they loved us trained him to expect rescue and trained me to provide it. Mom called it looking out for your brother. Dad called it being the responsible one. Neither of them ever used the word boundary, because in our house that word didn't exist. There was just family, and family did what needed doing, and what needed doing always seemed to require my signature. Marcus had called me 8 weeks before the paralegal's phone call. It was a Sunday evening, the kind of call that comes when someone has been rehearsing. He said he'd been looking at a place. A house. He was tired of renting, tired of throwing money away, ready to put down roots. He sounded settled in a way I hadn't heard before, and I remember thinking that was good. I remember being genuinely glad. He said the only problem was his credit score. It had improved, but not enough. He said he'd talked to a lender and the numbers were close but not quite there. He said he wasn't asking me to do anything. He just wanted me to know he was trying. I said I was proud of him. He said thanks and told me he'd figure it out. We hung up and I went back to the documentary I'd been watching, and that was the last time Marcus mentioned a house to me. I did not know he had figured it out. I did not know what figuring it out looked like. The paralegal's name was Donna. She was, by my estimation, approximately twice as professional as anyone is required to be in a situation that embarrassing, and I am grateful for her to this day. She did not hang up. She did not transfer me. She stayed on the line and answered every question I asked in the careful, measured tone of someone who understood that what I was hearing was going to take a few passes to fully land. She confirmed the address. She confirmed the purchase price. She confirmed the loan amount and the lender and the closing date, which was 11 days away. She confirmed that the primary borrower listed on the application was Marcus Darnell Whitmore. She confirmed that the co-signer, whose credit history and income documentation had been used to qualify the loan, was listed as Caleb James Whitmore. She spelled out my social security number and asked me to confirm it. I confirmed it. She said, very quietly, "Sir, did you authorize this application?" I said no. There was a long moment. Then she said, "I'm going to need to transfer you to our compliance department. And I am very sorry. Here is what I did not do. I did not call Marcus. I did not call my parents. I did not call anyone in my family. I got off the phone with Donna's compliance colleagues at 4:47 in the afternoon, and I sat in my office until the cleaning crew knocked at 6:15, and I thought, I am an accountant. When something doesn't add up, the first thing you do is not confront anyone. The first thing you do is gather every number. You find out exactly what you're looking at before you decide what to do about it. I called the lender's fraud department myself the next morning, from my personal cell, before I went into the office. I spoke to a man named Gerald who was thorough and direct and treated me like an adult, which I appreciated more than I expected to. Gerald walked me through the application. Marcus had used my social security number, my credit score, my income documentation, including what appeared to be pay stubs from my employer, and a signature on a co-signer agreement that I had not signed. Gerald asked if I had any documentation that might help establish the timeline. I told him I was a CPA and that I had documentation for nearly everything. He said that would be useful. Then Gerald told me something Donna hadn't. This was not the first inquiry. There had been a pre-approval letter pulled 8 months earlier under the same information. It had not progressed to a purchase at that time. But the inquiry was there. 8 months ago, Marcus had tested the water with my name before he decided to dive in. I thanked Gerald and hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I watched the clock. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't moving, and I needed to let the thing I now knew fully arrive. My brother had not made a mistake. He had not acted impulsively. He had made a plan, tested it, waited, and executed it. He had used my name the way you use a tool, deliberately, purposefully, and with the expectation that the tool wouldn't object because it never had before. The reason he hadn't told me was not that he was ashamed. It was that he didn't think he needed my permission. He thought my credit was something he had access to. The same way he'd had access to my co-signatures and my utility account and the business card I'd quietly paid down in November. He had not taken something from me because he was desperate. He had taken it because it had always been available. I went home that evening and I called my therapist, whose name is Dr. Anita Reeves and who has, over the past 4 years, helped me understand a number of things about myself that I had previously attributed to personality. One of those things is that I had spent my entire adult life operating under the belief that love was something you earned through being useful. That the way to make people stay was to give them reasons to need you. Dr. Reeves had been patient about this. I had been slow. I told her what had happened. I told her about the paralegal, about Gerald, about the 8-month pre-approval test I hadn't known was happening. She said, "What do you want to do?" I said I didn't know yet. She said, "You have the right to report this. Full stop. Regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that." I told her I knew that. She said, "And whatever you decide, it needs to be your decision. Not your family's. Yours." I told her I understood that too. Then I went home and I made a spreadsheet. Old habit. I listed every financial act I had performed on Marcus's behalf since I was 23 years old. The co-signed car loan. The utility account. The business card. The 2 late payments I'd covered. The November balance paydown. And now this, a $340,000 mortgage with my name on it and a closing date 11 days out. The total liability exposure if the mortgage went south was not a small number. I looked at that spreadsheet for a long time. Then I started a second tab. On the second tab I listed my options. Reporting the fraud to law enforcement. Contacting the lender's fraud department and proceeding formally. Calling Marcus directly. Calling my parents. Doing nothing. I am a CPA. I understand risk. I understand that doing nothing is also a choice, and that it has a cost, and that the cost in this case was one I had been paying for 14 years in the form of quiet November paydowns and absorbed utility bills and a fundamental misunderstanding of what I was to my brother. I was not his brother. I was his infrastructure. I closed the spreadsheet and I slept 7 hours, which was more than I expected. The next morning I called the lender's fraud department and told Gerald I was moving forward formally. I also hired an attorney. Her name is Patricia Osei and she's a partner at a firm that handles financial fraud. When I walked into her office and put my documentation on her desk, the credit pull history, the pay stub discrepancies, the timeline, the second tab of the spreadsheet, she looked at it for 4 minutes without speaking. Then she looked at me. She said, "This is thorough." I told her I was an accountant. She said that was going to help. "I want to tell you about the phone call with Marcus because I think it's the part you've been waiting for, and I want to get it right." Patricia advised me not to contact Marcus directly until the formal complaint was filed and the lender had been notified. I followed that advice. I want to be clear that I am not telling you this story because I want sympathy for what I did. I want to tell it accurately. Marcus found out the way people find out when something is unraveling without their knowledge. The lender froze the application pending investigation. The closing was postponed. Marcus called the title company and was told there was a compliance issue. He spent 2 days trying to understand what that meant. Then he called me. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. The third call came on a Wednesday evening at 8:43 p.m. I was sitting in my kitchen eating dinner I had made myself, chicken and rice, nothing remarkable, and I looked at his name on the screen for a long time. Then I answered. He said, Caleb, man, I think there's some kind of mix-up with this mortgage and your name is somehow on it. I don't know how that happened. I let him finish. There was a pause. I said, Marcus, I know what happened. He was quiet. I said, I know about the pre-approval 8 months ago. I know about the pay stubs. I know about the signature. And I've already spoken to an attorney and the fraud department at the lender. He was still quiet. I said, I'm not going to tell you what the outcome of this is going to be, because I honestly don't know yet. But I need you to understand something. I loved you enough to let you borrow from me every time you asked, and I never made it a burden, and I never kept score. And you took that and you decided it meant you could use my name without asking. He started to say something. I don't remember what. I said, I'm not angry at you, Marcus. I'm not calling you to fight. I'm calling you back because I still believe you deserve to hear this from me directly. What you did was fraud. It was a crime. And the reason it worked as long as it did is because you knew I wouldn't notice, or if I noticed, I wouldn't say anything. And that part, the part where you knew, that's what I'm going to have to sit with for a while. He said my name. Just once, the way people say your name when they don't have anything else ready. I said goodnight and I hung up. The fraud complaint resulted in the mortgage application being withdrawn. Marcus did not face criminal charges, in part because Patricia negotiated a resolution in which Marcus signed a formal acknowledgement of the unauthorized use and agreed to specific financial terms for remediation. That agreement is between us and I won't detail it here. What I'll say is that it was more than fair and that Patricia made sure my exposure was fully addressed. My parents found out 3 weeks later. My father said very little. My mother cried and then said something I had heard before in different forms, you could have just talked to him first. As though the talking was the part that had been missing. As though the previous 14 years of quiet accommodation were not a form of conversation. As though the message I had sent every single time I absorbed a cost without complaint was somehow unclear. I told my mother I understood why she felt that way. I told her I had made the decision I needed to make. She hasn't stopped talking to me. We have Sunday calls. They are shorter than they used to be and more honest, which I prefer. Marcus and I have spoken twice since the legal matter resolved. They were not warm conversations. They were not cold ones either. They were the kind of conversations you have when you are two people who share a history and are in the process of figuring out whether there's a future. I don't know the answer to that yet. I'm leaving the question open. What I know is this. I am a CPA. I understand how accounts work. I understand that a ledger has 2 sides and that for a long time mine had been accumulating entries on only one of them. The night I sat in my car in the parking garage and looked at the clock for 11 minutes was the night I started counting both. There's a version of this story where I say I got justice. I'm not sure that's the right word. What I got was accuracy. A true accounting of what my family cost me, what I had allowed, and what I was no longer willing to authorize. I did not lose a brother. I renegotiated the terms. And for the first time in 36 years, the terms were mine. That's the story. If you've ever been someone's safety net when they didn't even bother to ask first, I hope this lands somewhere useful for you. Drop a comment. Subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.